Hello, myself Vidhi Ahir, and in this video I am going to explain you about video streaming using RTSP and RTP. My group mates are Harsh Acharya, Parth Prajapati and Jil Chaudhary. So what is RTSP? RTSP stands for Real-Time Streaming Protocol. It is an application layer protocol. It started as a way to allow users to play audio and video straight from the internet rather than having to download media files to the device. One of the main uses of RTSP is to receive streaming video and obtain data from the server. Now, what is RTP? RTP stands for Real-Time Transport Protocol. It provides real-time transmission of voice. It is a network standard designed for transmitting audio or video data that is optimized for consistent delivery of live data. It is used in internet telephony, voice over IP, and video telecommunication. There are multiple types of methods that are used in RTSP. Here I will explain you about some of them. So firstly, setup. Setup request tells the server how to transport the media and which port to use. Next up, play. A play request tells the server to begin playing the media. Next is pause. A pause request tells the server to pause the media playback. Next up, tear down. A tear down request terminates the media sharing session. This is the diagram of how the RTSP protocol works. The initial state of server is init. When the client sends the request of setup, the state of server is changed to ready. When the client sends request of play, the state of server is changed to playing. When the client sends the request of pause, the state of server is again get changed to ready. This process will continue till the client sends the request of play and pause. And when the client sends the request of tear down, the server is again set back to init state.
So in code there are two things. One is server side and second one is client side. So first we will look into the server side, then we will look into the client side. So in a server side, first the port number as a system argument on which the server is running. Then we basically create a RTSP socket and then we bind the created socket to the server port, and this is basically a maximum connection for RTSP socket. Then we receive the client connection request. So if we accept the client connection request, then we store the client info into the library, and then basically we start running the server. So in server worker file, first we initialize the variable. These four variables are the four RTSP methods. These three is the main three states, and this variable is for indicate the current state. Then we store the client info in this dictionary, and this init function is for initialization of client info. Then this run function, basically for each client we create a thread, and that thread for that particular client RTSP request are received. This receive RTSP request function, in which we are receiving the data from the client, and here we can see that after that data received we are calling the process RTSP request. Then in process RTSP request function we are processing the RTSP request which is sent by the client, and we will process the request that which type of request is this and do further process according to that. And here first we get the request type, then the corresponding media or file name, and get the RTSP sequence number. and here then we check all the states. If the request type is set up and currently the state is init, then we update state to the ready state, and server will reply to that setup request is success and get the RTP or UDP port from the last line. And then if request type is play request and this current state is the ready, then the state is changed to the playing as per the state diagram, and we create a new socket for RTP UDP. And create socket for the reason is RTP UDP to send data from server to client, which will use in the user datagram protocol, and then this respond to playing request that receive a request successfully, and then basically create a thread for particular client to send data using RTP protocol, and at the end we just start the thread and sending the RTP packets. And now if request type is post type and the current state is playing, then we just change the state to ready and stop running the thread and respond that the current request process request is successful. And if request type is tear down type, then we just stop the thread and response process request that it is successfully received, and in tear down we should close the RTP socket too. Then in the send RTP function, in the loop we check that if current state is pause or tear down, then we just break it, else we get the data from currently video stream class, and this data is frame number and address and port of client so that we can send packet to client using it. And we make a RTP will create the packet and receive packet will send to client using address and port. And then this reply state function is basically which will reply the client info. If it is successfully completed, then it shows that the 200 okay, else it is reply an error message. So this is basically about the reply RTSP function. So in make RTP function, we create a RTP packet which is by from the RTP packet class. For create a RTP packet which consists the RTP header and the payload data, and this is the encode part in which we define this all functions and just return the its packet. So these functions are defined in this RTP packet file. So in here in encode we setting the different header bits, and then this is decode function for decode the byte error, then the version function, then sequence number function, timestamp for function for the payload type, which is basically return the type of the data, and get payload function which return the actual data which is in the payload, and this get packet data function is return the header plus the payload. Now we will run and see the corresponding output. So we can see that the request type is setup, and this is corresponding the file name, and one is the sequence number. We can see from the both side, client and the server. That is all about for the server side. Now we look into the client side. In this client launcher file, we abstract this four value. Among them, one is server address on which the server is running. Second is the server port, which is RTSP socket port, and the third one is RTP port, which is the port on which our RTP port is running, and the file name. This file name is of the file we want to stream or get from the server, and this is for the create GUI using this Kinter library, which is in the Python, and we create this client class in which the root, server address, server port, RTP port, and file name are the attributes. So now we run the client class. So in client, in starting we initialize the variable which are the required variable for different state, and this is for the current state as we have previously discussed. And these are the RTSP methods. This for the RTSP version and for the transport. Now we do the initialization. So we setting up the different variable. In it we set the session ID to 0, then RTSP sequence number to 0, and tear down acknowledge to 0, then call the connect to server function. So in connect to server function, yeah, so basically we create in it we create a RTSP socket at the client side and connect to server using server side RTSP socket. This is about the connect to server function, and after initialization creating socket, then this is the create widget function. So in it this function is for create a GUI. So in this setup button is there, play button, pause button, tear down. So here you can see that this is play button, setup button, pause button, tear down button. So this code is for it. Then define the this button works. So by pressing the setup button, we are sending RTSP request from client to server. So as we can see here, after we click, we get a response just like this. Then these pause movie, play movie are the corresponding button code which are running behind it. So for play moving, here we create a new thread for getting data from the server to client, then send request to play it. Then this listen RTP function. So in this we receiving continuous data from the RTP socket. So after receiving the data, we create RTP packet and then decode the data we receive from the server side, and assign the sequence number to the current frame number. Then this relation is to define that we have to discard the packet, late packet, or update it. So here it is for the update the frame using the update movie function. Then this is for the pause or tear down requesting code. Then we write code about the right frame, update movie functions, and then send. Here the send RTSP request function. So basically in this function first we check that the current request type is setup and init type of request. Then we basically create a thread to receive RTSP request from the server and then update the sequence RTSP sequence number increment by 1, and this request is right like this, which is we can see here. Then we keep track of send request number, so track the last request which we sent to the server. Then if this current request type is play and the ready, then we increment the RTSP sequence number and write the corresponding RTSP request. Then keep track of the send request, and if the current request is the request type is pause and the playing, then increment the RTSP sequence number 1, likewise so on. And if the tear down request type and the init, then we increment sequence number by 1 and then write the RTSP request, and then send the RTP request using the RTP socket. And in this receive RTSP reply, so basically we close the RTSP socket upon requesting tear down time. We have to close the RTSP socket in server and as well as in the client side. Then parse RTSP reply function. So we abstract the data sequence number and like from here, and this is continue if only and only if the server reply sequence number is the same as the request number, and if session id is 0, then we update the session id, and if this session id is the same, then we have to open the RTP port to receive the data from the server, then play the thread if exists and do the things. Then open RTP port function. So for create in it we create a new datagram socket to receive RTP packets from the server and do the binding thing, and this handler function for the user process cancel and resuming things. And these are the function setup movie for the describe buttons, play movie, this exit the client. So as we discussed earlier, that play movie to create a new thread and send the TSP request. So this is all about the code. Now I will show you the demo of the video streaming. So first I'll run the server side and pass the parameter into terminal. This 1025 is the server port. Then pass the parameter for the client side, in which basically first parameter is the server address, then server port, and this is the RTP port and the file name. So this Windows UI is pop up and we set up it. So from client side request is SAM, and then the server side request is, you can see the receive. Now if we play, then we can see at the client side different sequence number are generated and the requests are received at the server side. And then if we pause the video, then you can see that current state is pause, current sequence number is 3. And now do the tear down, then let's send the tear down request sent by the client, and at the server side we receive the request and the sequence number is 4. So this is all about the video streaming. Thank you. Thank you very much.